So it gives me a tremendous amount of pleasure. It is a treat for me to introduce my good friend and colleague, Rabbi Diane Elliot, who has been my teacher for years, my mentor. Um, she is a spiritual teacher, ritual leader, somatic therapist, dancer, writer, based in the East Bay here in the San Francisco Bay Area. She has served as a program director with Aleph Alliance for Jewish Renewal and is a steward and faculty member of Taproot, which is where she and I have gotten a chance to work most closely together. She has published collections of poems, including This is the Day, Hayom Yom poems, inspired by the practice of counting the Omer. Her website is www.holypresent.org, and I will spell that in the chat in a moment. Rabbi Diane is an inspiration to everyone who knows her and everyone who has the zechut, the merit to get to learn from her. Rabbi Diane, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi Irwin. I am just delighted to be here with everyone this evening. Um, and thank you so much for such an amazing introduction, music, poetic guiding of us into the mountain space. We're going to begin this segment of learning with a nigun that I'm going to put up on the screen for us. And this is a very ancient part of Torah that I would like to share with you. Just get me to the right place here. Okay. Can you see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So we're going to be looking at this text in a little while, but just inviting you to chant with me, Ali Ve'er Enula, the musical setting by our dear friend Rabbi Shefa Gold, and the quote, the verse from the book of the Midbar in the wilderness. Rise up, O well. Rise up, O well. Sing her up. Chant her. Sing her up. Ali ve'er enula, enula, Ali ve'er enula, enula, Ali ve'er enula, enula, Ali ve'er enula. That's the whole thing. So try it with me. Ali ve'er enula, enula, Ali ve'er enula, enula, Ali ve'er enula, enula, Ali ve'er enula. Ali ve'er enula, enula, Ali ve'er enula, enula, Ali ve'er enula, enula, Ali ve'er enula. Ali ve'er and ulam. So, here we are together on this Erev Shavuot, this night of preparation, anticipating the giving and receiving of Torah tomorrow. Our sages of blessed memory taught that the Torah was given through three things: fire, water, and wilderness. Fire, because Mount Sinai was wreathed in smoke as God descended upon it in flames. Water, because the heavens dripped water as the divine spoke. And wilderness, because Torah, we are taught, can only be received, heard, in an unbounded wild place, rife with risk and potential. Here in California, we're literally thirsting for water right now. And everywhere in the world, it seems, human beings are thirsty for the waters of life, for the waters of wisdom, the waters that we in our tradition call Torah, flowing from the great, deep sea of being to sustain and refresh us in the wilderness of these hard times in which we find ourselves. So the subject of this session is the spiritual quality of a Netzaḥ, which is often translated as victory or success or eternity. So I'm curious how each of you might define victory or success for yourself right now, or maybe eternity. So let's just take a moment as we enter into this space. Before I share any of my ideas with you, I'd love to hear your ideas in the chat. I think is the easiest way to do that. So I think, do we have access all to the chat? And make sure that, yeah, thank you, that everyone in meeting is receiving your message. And just invite you to put in the chat, how do you see victory or success at this moment in your life? What would that mean for you? Netzaḥ. Take a moment. So I'm seeing some things come into the chat. Judith, when I can truly be myself, presence, overcoming, doing, bettering failure, shortcoming, to be one with myself, to have an open heart and not be afraid. Beautiful. Feeling whole and reclaiming my Jewish birthright. Thank you, Lissa. Netzaḥ for me is overcoming self-doubt. And that is certainly a big spiritual obstacle for many of us. Finding ways to connect with community in the broadest sense. Rabbi Jill, and we will be coming back to that this evening. Deeply listening, making positive choices. Rena, I am, was, will be. Feeling less upset and knowing that all is well. We're asking for some very basic and simple things as we speak about victory, about Netzaḥ. presence, sustaining our presence, untethered joy. Thank you, Susan. Unencumbered love, peace of mind and heart and spirit. We're not talking about battles out there in the world. We're talking about ease and peace and some place to land and light and settle. Some way of perhaps being present and coping with the wilderness. So feel free to keep those coming into the chat or to keep meditating, ruminating, contemplating that question. In our kabbalistic tradition, Netzaḥ, as you may know, is one of the 10 sephirot, or divine emanations that comprise the kabbalistic tree of life. And for some of us who may have been counting the Omer during these past 7 weeks between Passover and Shavuot and refining these qualities and becoming more present with them, you might know that the sephirah of Netzaḥ, when we think about the tree of life in a sort of vertical way, Netzaḥ partakes of all, it receives all the sphirot above it, quote, above it on the tree. And particularly during the Omer, we allow the flow through chesed, unbounded loving kindness, gevura, strength, and in discipline and boundary, through the heart center of tiferet, which is the harmonizing of seeming opposites, the holding of wholeness, the balance of truth that then flows into Netzaḥ, our victory, our success, our connection with eternity. Netzaḥ is that force of spirit that keeps us moving onward despite all odds. It encompasses the qualities of perseverance and endurance, connecting and aligning us with the larger reality that is enduring, that is infinite and eternal. It's what keeps us keeping on when the challenges of life crash over us, like the great breakers against a rocky ocean shore, or when the sorrows beat down on us mercilessly like the hot sun as we trek through a seemingly endless desert with no water in sight. So in current parlance, Netzaḥ might be translated as resilience, right? The ability to rebound when we hit bottom and rise again. Resilience, a big word right now. The resourcefulness to pivot, another big word right now, when the way is blocked, and to forge a new path. The faith and the conviction to live our highest values, which many of you placed into the chat when you talked about what victory and success is for you right now. The faith and conviction to continue to live our highest values, no matter what. Some of you may be familiar with the work of the wonderful actress and writer Naomi Newman, founding member of a traveling Jewish theater, and perhaps her marvelous monologue, Snake Talk, where she talks about folks who, when the forces of the universe, of the cosmos, gather against them, rather than being knocked over and never getting up again, they learn to fall down, get up. One move. Fall down, get up. Netzaḥ. So I have been asking myself what wisdom Torah, our Torah, has to offer about cultivating Netzaḥ. I think there's quite a bit of it. This ability to fall down, get up, to survive, and more than survive, to stay true to our highest values and open and loving through really, really tough times. So I brought us two little pieces of text tonight from the book of Midbar, the book that we just opened up today, this Shabbos, the book that's called In the Wilderness, and which is perhaps the ultimate guidebook to Netzaḥ, with Moses at the center of it as its central figure, and Moses as the traditional exemplar in our tradition of Netzaḥ. And I brought us two little snippets of text that I think when we look at them together, we'll look at them one at a time, but when we look at them side by side, I think there are some powerful hints for us about resourcing Netzaḥ in these times. And both of these pieces are literally about bringing forth water, life-giving, sustaining water in the dry barrens of a terrifying wilderness. So before I share the first piece, I just wonder if somebody might be a volunteer while I can still see you to read the text out loud to us, to unmute and read the text. Is anyone willing to do that?
I will.
Oh, great, Paula. Okay, I'm going to share the screen again, and it'll take me a moment to bring this text up. Okay, so if you would perhaps read the English for us here.
Can I say Adonai?
Sure, say whatever is easiest for
Okay.
you.
God spoke to Moses saying, tell me if I'm not loud enough.
I think you're,
Okay. God spoke to Moses saying, take the staff and gather the assembly. You and Aaron, your brother, and the two of you speak to the cliff before their eyes, and it will give its water. You will bring forth water for them from the cliff, and you will give drink to the community and to their animals. Am I going too fast?
slow down just a little bit so we can
So
take it in.
Moses took the staff before God as he was commanded. And Moses and Aaron gathered the community before the jagged cliff face, and he said to them, is that slow enough?
Great.
Okay. Now listen up, rebels. Shall we bring forth water for you from this rock? Moses raised his arm and struck the cliff twice with his staff, and water gushed forth, and the assembly and their animals drank. Then God said to Moses and to Aaron, because you did not have faith in me to affirm my holiness in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this community to the land that I have given them. These are the waters of rebellion, where the children of Israel resist God, and God was sanctified through them.
Thank you so much, Paula. So let me contextualize this piece just a little bit. It's maybe a familiar and famous moment here, a pivotal moment in the saga of the Israelites' desert sojourn and Moses's role as their leader. So you may know that after leaving Mount Sinai, where they had been encamped for a couple of years, getting a big download from on high from that amazing reality that was summoned up during our introduction to tonight's Tikkun. After leaving Mount Sinai, the people have endured blow after blow, failure after failure, plagues and battles, the failed mission of the spies, dooming them to 38 more years of wandering. And now Miriam, the prophetess, sister of Aaron and Moses, who along with them has led the people, she has died and there is no water. And the magical well, which the legends say followed the people through the desert on the strength of Miriam's merit, is gone. And the people are thirsty and hungry and scared and complaining for the umpteenth time. Oi, 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 they're complaining. Why did you bring us to this evil place, this wilderness, to die here? If only we had perished in Egypt or died in the desert like the others who have already been struck down by these plagues and these battles. There aren't any grapes, no figs, no pomegranates, no Taco Bell, no Starbucks, no water. And so this piece that Paula just read to us is what happens immediately after that. So let's look at it for a few minutes here. It says, Vayidaber Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh El Moshe Lemor, and God beingness speaks through Moses to Moses and says, take your staff, take the staff, Kach et Hamateh, and gather the people together. And with Aaron, your brother, the two of you are going to speak to this cliff, this jagged cliff, in the sight of all the people, and it's going to give its water. You will bring forth water for them from the cliff, and you will give drink to the community and to their animals. And Moses takes the staff, as we just heard, and the community is gathered before them, and he speaks not to the rock, he speaks to them. Now listen up, you rebels. Shall we bring forth water for you from this rock? And you know what happens. Strikes the rock, water gushes forth, and the divine immediately says, because you didn't have faith in me to affirm my holiness, you shall not bring these people into the land. So I just want to invite us to think, to be with this text for a minute, to be with this piece of Torah that's really rather hard. And I ask you, what is standing out for you in this text? What is the state of Moses' Netzaḥ? What do you know about that? And what about this punishment? Do you notice? I'm going to just bring us back together so we can see one another. And just invite, if you have a thought, a feeling, a response, great, to use, as Dorothy is using the raised hand function, or to write in the chat. And Dorothy, if you would unmute, can you unmute?
I have the same question as the last person who put something in the chat. Why is this called the water of rebellion? And then right after that, it says something about, what does it say? This is something I can't see the text anymore, but what does it say right after this? These are the waters of rebellion, as though that's a good description. And then it says, and this brings forth God before the children of Israel, or something like that. And why, that sounds good, that last part, but the waters of rebellion, you'd think that this would go forward in a rebellious period for the wanderers of the desert. Instead, it sounds sort of like it's the conclusion. Please tell me, could you tell me the last line of that quote?
So the very last line. These are the waters of rebellion, where the children of Israel resisted Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and God was sanctified through them, is the English translation. V'nei
Okay, so
Yisrael et Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh by Kadesh Bam. God was made holy, somehow sanctified in them, through them, by means of them.
that sounds impossible if they were drinking the waters of rebellion.
It does, doesn't it?
That's what I'm questioning.
Yeah, I'm going to open up these questions back to you, to all of us. If you have a response, a thought about what Dorothy brought forward, we're not going to try to answer all the questions, but we're going to bring them forward. And if you have a thought about this or something else, feel free to jump in. So I see Beverly has got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I'm wondering if part of the problem is the anger of Moses rather than the disobedience of the people.
And could you just say that again? I had a little trouble hearing what you were
Sorry.
saying.
It seems from the text that part of the problem is the anger of Moses rather than the disobedience of the people.
Yeah, that's quite present, isn't it? Moses gets angry. He hits the rock.
The rock.
So he, yeah, there's some almost a physical sense of picking up that staff and smashing the rock. So yes, thanks for that observation. It seems like there's multiple emotional responses happening here, right? Multiple angers and rebellions and yeah. And Rabbi Jill, are you raising your hand? No, you're just rubbing your hand. Thanks for bringing that, Beverly. Judith, I see your hand though.
I'm thinking, doesn't the word Kaddish have a quality of separateness, like holiness that's separated in a way? And I'm thinking that maybe that reflects how the holy action is a little bit separate from what is going on in a way. And God has the holiness and it's available, but we're not quite meeting it.
Mm-hmm. So the holiness is not in the people at this point.
Yeah.
The holiness is
God is separating into holiness somehow.
think about this just in terms for a moment of Netzaḥ, of endurance, of ability to persist, to keep going. Can you hear in this? I don't know how many of you are familiar with just what happens in a trauma response when challenges happen over and over again, and how perhaps reactive, overreactive, hyperreactive we can become when we're traumatized, and what that does to our Netzaḥ, to our ability to persist. Yael, please. Oh, I have Shoshana.
Hi,
Hi.
Aksamea.
Hagsamea.
Thank you for bringing this passage to us. I've had a musing for a long time about Miriam's death and the loss of the well, the loss of the feminine that's connected to the depths, that where she puts down the well water rises without effort. And here's Moses, in the wake of his grief, and doesn't know how to do that, or maybe there's not a faith that will happen. I'm very curious about this, how that all goes together. The loss of Miriam in the well and the striking the rock.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Shoshana. Yeah, that's there. It's helpful to look at the juxtaposition of events in Torah. And even though we say there's no before or no after in Torah, there does seem to be a relation between Miriam's death, which is unmourned in the Torah. There's no mourning period for Miriam. All it says is, and Miriam died there. And then the people go on. And then suddenly there's no water. And how must Moses be feeling about the loss of his sister? No mourning period. So one more, Basha, two more, Basha and then Rabbi Jill.
Thank you. So what gets me is Moses did all this stuff. He got the people out of Egypt. He brought them to Mount Sinai. And for this, he can't go to the promised land. For this moment of impatience and, what God says, not trusting, it reminds me of when when they cross the Red Sea, and that man who walks into the water with great faith, whereas Moses is a little hesitant and has to part the sea with his staff. It's a similar kind of thing where so much is required of us, it seems.
Yeah, so much is required of Moses, right?
Yes.
And if we are, in some sense, if we place ourselves in the story, it's like, how do we keep going? This is the question of Netzaḥ. And if I make one mistake, is that it? Is it all over? I don't get to go into the land. So
Right.
hold that question. Hopefully by the end of our time, we'll have a little more insight on that.
Okay.
And yeah, thank you so much for bringing that. And one final comment, Rabbi Jill.
So I was thinking about what you were saying about Netzaḥ and resilience, and it seems that Moses just lost it. He just had come to the end of his rope with the people, and it's always occurred to me that while understandable as an individual, he was the leader of the people. And when he loses it, has always made me think about what did the people do with that? You know, that they were looking to him for him to be resilient, for him to be strong and to, show a way through.
Right. So thank you. This is a perfect lead into the next text. I'm going to share the next little bit of text with you. And what I want to say is that this bit of text occurs very soon after the text we just read, very soon after Moses strikes the rock. There's a few other things that happen. The main thing that happens is that Aaron then dies. Aaron and Moses together were at the rock, and they're together told that they're not going to be able to go into the land. And then God says it's time for Aaron to leave the body. Take Aaron up to the mountain, take his son Eleazar with him, strip off his priestly garments, put them on his son, which Moses does. And then Aaron is, it says, gathered to his people. And then it says the people mourn for 30 days. So that happens soon after the rock is struck. And then very soon after that in the text, not very many verses later, we get this piece of text. And this has in it the words that we sang at the very beginning this evening. And so it says, the people then are traveling. So this is kind of mid-travels, this little piece of text. And this is a very, very ancient part of the Torah. It says, and from there toward Be'er, which literally means well. They went from where they were toward the well, which is the well where you'd have Vav-He, where the divine said to Moses, gather the people and I will give them water. And we don't know exactly where this well is. It says in the text, it's near the river Arnon. It's not the same place where they were before. And then it says, Israel sang this song. Az Yashir Yisrael et hashira hazot. Then Israel sang this song. Ali ve'er enula. Rise up, O well, sing to her. Be'er chafaruha sarim, the well that the chieftains, the princes, the sarim dug. Karuha nidivei ha'am. That this is usually translated that the nobles of the people excavated. But what strikes me here, nidivei ha'am, maybe you recognize this Nidiv, this word. It's the same word that is applied to the people when Moses is told to tell the people to bring from their own belongings, to build the Mishkan, the communal structure. And it says the Nidiv Halev, those who are eager of heart. So for me, when I'm reading this, I'm translating it, the people who eagerly step forward to excavate this well. Bima chokek b'mish anotam, to carve it out. So the word for carving out contains within it the word chok or chuk, which means statute or law or regulation or a way of living, a rule for living by, and that they are carving out, in a sense, this way of living with their own personal staffs. It's a different word than the staff that Moses takes when he strikes the rock is mateh, is the staff of leadership. This is the staffs of the people, mish'anotam, umimidbar matana, a gift. This water is a gift from the wilderness. So I just wanted to bring these two texts for us to kind of look at them side by side and see if they are telling us anything about what happened with Moses, why he can't go into the land, and what is the Netzaḥ that allows people, that allows us, that allows them to go on. What is this little text showing us? I'm going to come back, bring us back together, and see if anything quickly comes up for you around this. I think what I'd like to do is, rather than share in the whole group, if you are open to it, is to invite you into small groups so that people have a chance to just share your ideas a little bit with one another before we come back together and conclude this learning. So, oh, Reb Irwin is putting in the chat. That's another place to share responses. And sorry, I didn't see all the responses earlier. That's a great place to put them in. Yeah, what did Aaron do that was rebellious? I love how that song is a literal incantation. It's a summoning up of the water. Yeah, sing her up, chant her up. And what a contrast to hitting the rock with a staff, right? Is to singing to the water. So Aaron, what did Aaron do? He was there with Moses. He didn't say anything, but he was part of not saying anything at that moment. And maybe he's tired. Maybe he's old. What about the Netzaḥ? What about the strength to keep going? So I'm sorry, I didn't put in the chat the sources that you're looking at, but I will. I'll put them in the chat. And then if we could just go into maybe groups of 3 for maybe 8 or so minutes, just to check in with each other a little bit about what you're thinking. So let me see if I can bring up these sources and put them into the chat for you quickly. Huh. I'm putting the second source in first. See if I can fit it in here. So that's the second source. So we only have a few moments left in the session. Barbara is telling me.
Oh, there it is. Oh, go ahead.
So perhaps we'll just stay here together. Yeah, Dorothy.
I think that Moses, although he was stressed out, understandably, but he was the one who was honored or, made able to speak with God. And as a leader, I think God was saying, the responsibility is to me and not to your temper. And was bringing that out. Then when and to me, that makes sense. It's not easy to be a leader. We know that. And he did mess up. So then he doesn't get to go into the promised land. And it was, I think, a true mess up and a message from God that responsibility must be maintained. And but when we come to the next well, it's the land that redeems the people in a way. You sing to the well, sing to the land, and the land gives forth to the people. And this makes a connection between the people and their land and their God.
Beautifully put. Thank you so much. Yeah. So the land is giving its gift. And I think we'll just stay together. We just have a few more minutes here. Any other responses? I'm just looking into the chat. And Rabbi Jill has given the source of the first. I can't put it into the chat right now. It's too long, so I'm sorry about that. Leah.
Yeah, I'm thinking when we look at the earth giving its bounty to the people, when I think of Shekhinah, I think of something that comes down from above. I don't hear an awful lot in the Jewish literature that I'm aware of that talks about Mother Earth. But this is certainly a case of the earth being our sustainer, giving us nourishment. And it may be just sort of out of the blue, but that just occurred to me.
So the earth as a source of Netzaḥ, that's quite beautiful. As a source of sustenance, as a source of resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And literally saving people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Without water, we die.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Reb Irwin.
Yeah, I am struck, as it were, by the distinction between striking the rock and singing the well into existence. And I think so much of the time when I translate Netzaḥ as like endurance or even resilience feels like an uphill slog. It feels like a vast physical effort, and this and what this suggests to me is that if we're striking away at something in order to embody Netzaḥ, in order to feel our endurance, then maybe we're going about it the wrong way. And that the endurance the Netzaḥ we're looking for, the ability to be resilient, the ability to continue forward, has to do with how well we can sing what we need into existence. And practicing that. Oziva Zimratya, being the balance between strength and song. So, Dibati.
Shamati, thank you. Yeah, how well we can sing and dance into existence. I'm thinking about if you've ever done contact improv or Aikido, that fall down, get up, move, fall down, get up, uses the resistance of the earth and the yielding into the earth to bring you back up out of the earth. If you've ever done any of that movement, it's quite beautiful. Yes, Barbara.
When you began the discussion, you talked of Miriam's death. And I'm just wondering how this ability of hers to find the source of water without having to bang on rocks is transformed when her brothers are left trying to provide water for the people, and all they know is their physical strength rather than their nurturance. And I found myself kind of enjoying that sense of our ability to not learn from women's wisdom, to not tap into it as a source of resilience at times. In the same way, I love Leah talking about the yielding of Mother Earth, rather than having to drill into her to find what one needs. That so many of these hard images don't work as well, or at least for our 21st century minds, we find ourselves questioning them.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you. That harks back also to what Shoshana was bringing about where what happens to the feminine. And we know, those of us who perhaps have studied in a more scholarly way, that there were many more Miriam traditions that disappeared from the final canonized version of our Torah. And we have to fill in those traditions in some ways ourselves. And some say that the song at the sea, and I don't know if you heard the echo, Az Yashir B'nai Yisrael here, harks back to Az Yashir Moshe when they crossed the sea, Moshe U'B'nai Yisrael. And some say that it was Miriam who sang that song at the sea, not Moses.
Right.
So one more little piece, Dorothy, and then we're going to bring this in for a landing.
I have thought that Netzaḥ is to be translated as eternity also, which is endurance through time. A completely different, doesn't have such a masculine, we are going to tough it out. And so Netzaḥ is endurance through time via the great all.
Beautiful. Yes. Thank you. So that sense of what it takes for the long haul and how we resource ourselves. So I'm going to just bring us in for a landing here with a few closing words. And just honoring all that you brought, and hopefully this will keep fomenting and bubbling around in you, along with the water from that beautiful well that got sung up. What was Moses's essential failing at the waters of Meribah, the rebellion? Was it the people's rebellion? Was it Moses's rebellion? Whose rebellion? And why was this failing great enough to keep him from leading the people into the land of promise? This question got asked at the very beginning of our learning. So here's one interpretation. And this is the words of Benji Elson from his marvelous book that I have used the past couple of years, The Dance of the Omer. An amazing book. It's helpful far beyond the Omer period itself. And this is a quote: "To fully embody Netzaḥ, Moses first had to learn how to connect and align with eternality, eternity," just what Dorothy just said. Another process that is ultimately accomplished through the teachings of falling and rising, fall down, get up. Instead of listening to God at that moment at the rock, who told him to speak to the rock in order to obtain water, Moses hits the rock. And in effect, Moses had become stuck in his own understanding of how things ought to work, instead of deeply listening to what the present moment of reality called upon him to do. For something to be eternal, it must be able to adapt to whatever situation presents itself, to be flexible, to be fluid, while at the same time not losing any of its own essence. So that's the amazing thing about working through these sephirot, to be fluid, adaptable, transparent, and still in touch with its own, your own essence. Moses's failure in that moment to embody Netzaḥ showed that he would be unable to teach the people how to embody the eternal aspects of Netzaḥ, how to listen to one another once they come into the land. unquote. So Moses' failure to listen to the divine imperative demonstrates his inability to listen to others, grant them autonomy. And in Egypt, they might have been able to unite against together with that kind of strong hand against oppression. But in the land, they would need a leader to teach them to be able to listen to one another's needs. And I think that this kind of autonomy and mutuality are exactly what is demonstrated in the second passage that we read, where the people work together to dig and sing the water up, not with the one staff of leadership, but with all the staffs of those who are called into service, not with words alone, but with poetry and song and gentle enticing and music. So this is a deep, important lesson as we seek to sustain our strength and our will to act for the benefit of community, for the good of the whole, and ultimately for the sake of oneness that weaves through us all. Ali ve'er enula. I invite you to continue to hold the questions. Where is your resourcing in this time of challenge in our Midbar? How are you being resourced? What sustains you? Oh, thank you, everybody. Hag Sameach.
Thank you, Rabbi Diane, for such beauty and so much to take with us. We're going to take a short break, and Rabbi George will be here with us at 7:30. This is a good opportunity to go grab a slice of cheesecake. And if there's more bubbling up for you from this teaching, feel free to keep putting it in the chat, because all of this will be bubbling for us all night. So let's keep the well moving. We're going to stop the recording, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes.